What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon Kindle and Create Space. A link will be in the description box below, as usual. This video is entitled The Black Diaspora. While I'm listening to James Brown. Come on! Hit me! Mayo! Okay, now, sorry, I needed that. When it comes to the black diaspora, the slave trade, I think we think about it in certain ways, and I just want to challenge some of the ways we think about it, right? Because this is inspired by Black Panther movie, Killmonger When the Sun Sets. When you see the movie, you know what I'm talking about. He told them to bury him in the ocean, you know, because he think his ancestors had it right, you know, because he would rather die than be in bondage, right? And sometimes, you know, and I think about American Gods when Orlando Jordan was playing Anansi, and he was telling the guys on the ship, you know, slit the Dutch motherfuckers' throats and burn this ship down. And it was like, you know, but we're not dead, basically. And the guy was like, no, you dead already. You just don't know it yet. And the idea that, you know, we sold our own people into slavery, which I can't disagree with that. But part of the diaspora we don't really pay attention to is context and information per se. And what I mean by context and information, I mean of the people of that time. Think about it. There was quote unquote slavery at some point basically everywhere in the world. But with their slavery would be called as indentured servitude, which we would basically call prison. But it was like work release. You know what I'm saying? Like a work release thing was what slavery was. Work release, aka sharecropping, right? You work your debt off to society and then you get integrated back into the society. Thus, you know, that, you know, everybody deserves a second chance jail model. The brothers that came initially on the ships, I think using that idea and ideology, because that's how it was basically around the world when it came to indentured servitude. Even when the Irish came here and white people became slaves, it was indentured servitude. So it was something that they did in their own lands. So when the men were coming here, in my opinion, I have to take into consideration that some of them didn't think they was going to be here for a lifetime. They just think, oh, okay, I got jammed up, but after my 7 years is up, I'm going back home. You know, one of those situations, like, you know, a situation where I could work my way up, work my way out. And because of the language barriers, because I think initially a lot of the revolts and the killings and the burned down ships and you know the mutinies that when enslaved black men were killing what you would call slave traders and white folks in general, that was because they could communicate and they come to an understanding that, yo, this ain't indentured servitude. These fools really trying to do something, or something that they saw on the ship let them know that these weren't the kind of people that was doing the things the way they were doing things. So it went from a unfortunate situation to, you know, kill or be killed, right? Or I'd rather die than this shit, you know. So, and I also think over time, the information got around to certain people, but not everybody, you know, because that seemed to be the changing game when you look at the history of it. Is the idea that, you know, what keeps happening is they keep changing the rules so they keep changing the protocol, because a lot of people forget that there was a time where to get to the point where you have to to know that we need people who can't speak the same language. You had to get there from somewhere. You had to change up your tactics somehow. I think that was one of the reasons. I think part of the diaspora, well, our women feel certain things are unprotected here, and which is understandable. I think, the women don't necessarily know history and context either, because for the majority of slavery in America, it was primarily black men. If you say slavery was 250 years, then the last 80 they brought women. So 170 years, there you go. If you say it was 300, that'd be 220 would be all men. You get what I'm saying? That they were bringing into this country. That's the problem right there. Now, that's where we have these issues, because taking it into context of times, that's how they started splitting up families and all that stuff, because you kind of have men in the catch-22 where even a powerless man is considered dangerous, because there were revolts. They just don't talk about them in this country. There were constant revolts and house burnings and killing of white slave profiters. And what the women could say historically they didn't feel protected was the rape and pillage part. It was a lot of isolation and, divide and conquer. And because, that's the thing about one guy working in the women working in the house, the men working in the field, the house Negro working in the house, the field Negro working in the field, but also the context of guns. You can outnumber somebody, but if they out firepower you, that's a different conversation. And unfortunately, we never look at it, the diaspora, in that context, because what we didn't have was weapons. And people don't think about it because when you talk about American Indian culture, and some of us are basically American Indians, if y'all don't know that, but we're indigenous to this land, and we're imported into this land, but what it is what they used to do with the Indians. They say we're friends, we're cool, let's make a truce, put the tools away. I mean, put the weapons away, and let's be farmers and teach us agriculture. Okay, let's put I'm glad you taught us. Now, could you put those farming tools away, because we're kind of scared that you might kill us. And then they put the tools away. Now they're weaponless, and then same people who said we was disarmed come back around and shoot up everything and kill everybody. And those Indians had no way to defend themselves. That's part of the Apache method, where we just gonna fight dirty, because they figured out how dirty the people in this country were, or Caucasians were. So we don't take it in context. We don't look at our diaspora in certain contexts, and we don't look at, because of things like that, what women and children will use to keep the men in line, because, I can't risk killing this guy and having my wife and children killed. So it's better to be alive, even though my wife may get raped or the children may get beat or used, than if I come up short. Because you got to understand, it's not like slavery was one of those things where you were close in proximity to your oppressor. There was always a certain distance, because they were in fear of getting killed. So The only time they get up close and personal is when they isolate you, and it was a group. Same way the mob mentality was pervasive back then. Lynch mob mentality was the same thing, as far as getting the people on and off the ships and the sailings and all that. It was always a crowd of people trying to dominate over one person. They never brought groups in of slaves at a time. They made, it wasn't like they was bringing 25 people in at a time. Hell no. They'll bring 2, 3 at a time, and they'll be outnumbered and outgunned. So you do that numerous times. You know what I'm saying? So I think we got to take in consideration how the diaspora was in that time and the information of that time where people weren't able to communicate properly. That's part of not letting people read, not letting people write, not having people learn certain things, because if you can learn, you can share information, and then you can compile your information cohesively as a group and then act on that information. But also you can see who's doing what where. That's why the reverse of that context was always a house Negro that was a spy who was there to provide these slave profiters information. So we don't look at it in context about how some of our ancestors had a lot of dignity. They just didn't have information. They had a lot of pride, will, and determination and fight in them. They just didn't have the information. And unfortunately, some people had to find out other ways. You got to understand that you have to have some type of knowledge when, the spirituals that grew into gospel music was a system for slaves who stayed on plantations to let men, women, and children to escape, to let them give signals. Somebody had to stay behind to do that. We always work together, but just in a different way. So that's just my opinion. It's Black History Month, so I wanted to touch on certain things like this. So we out.